Back to photosynthesis, people. We're looking at the light reactions and we're studying the photopigments in the light reactions and where they're located. So we'll move back to our PowerPoint presentation, and I think we ended here. So I will set this up. All right, the question that we're on is, how are photopigments organized in thylakoid membranes? So we just talked about these photopigments that are found in thylakoid membranes that do the job of absorbing light energy. Things like chlorophylls A, chlorophyll B, carotenoids. How are they organized? This is a picture that shows us a thylakoid membrane, and this would be the inside or the thylakoid space, and this is the outside or the stroma of a chloroplast. And then we're going to take a look at this big purple blob in the middle. Let's redraw this a minute. I just want you to understand where we are. Remember that we're dealing with photosynthesis. It's happening inside the double-membraned chloroplast. So way out here would be like the cytoplasm, right? And this is a chloroplast. And then in the chloroplast are stacks of thylakoid sacs that are sitting in the stroma. Each sac has a membrane. That's what I've drawn in red here. The membrane is what we're looking at right now. And then inside would be like the space, the thylakoid space or the lumen of the thylakoid sac. We're looking at what's going on, where our pigments are is in the membrane, all right? And so these pigments are organized into what we call photosystems. Photosystems. Sometimes they're called PS2 and PS1 because there are two different kinds of photosystems. Each photosystem, though, is made up of a complex of proteins. So this big blob of proteins. That's shown here by our big purple structure inside the thylakoid membrane. A photosystem has, multiple proteins that are doing lots of jobs. Some of the proteins are structural proteins that are holding up the whole system. Some of them are binding to the pigment molecules that are found in the photosystem. Some of them are the reaction sites where reactions are taking place. Okay, so we've got these photopigments that are organized into photosystems. What happens is there are about 24 photopigments in every single photosystem. And they're represented here by these little green dots. So think of them as like chlorophyll A, chlorophyll B, carotenoids, things like that, okay? They're sitting inside a photosystem or a part of a photosystem that is doing what? Well, most of the pigments in this photosystem are called antenna pigments, okay? These antenna pigments are the ones that I've circled. And what happens with them is they absorb photons of light. They absorb light energy. And that light energy is then transferred from molecule to molecule throughout the photosystem until it's transferred to a reaction center. The reaction center is shown here in kind of this indigo blue color. The reaction center is where we've got a pair of chlorophyll A molecules. We call them the reaction center chlorophyll A molecules. They're sitting kind of in the middle of this photosystem, and they receive this transfer of energy from sunlight. And when they receive it, they react. What happens when they receive energy? When they receive packets of energy called photons, they get excited. This excites electrons in these special pair of chlorophyll A molecules. What do we mean by excites electrons? It causes some electrons to become excited, to move to a higher energy state, to physically move. Remember those energy shells in molecules that we talked about, or in atoms that we talked about? Electrons can move. And that's what happens here. They get excited. They move to a higher energy shell because of light energy. Okay. And when they move to a high, we show this by kind of having an upward arrow with an electron in it. All right, so electrons get excited. This is a picture of the thylakoid membrane and one photosystem. It's called photosystem 2 in it. And it's complicated. It's got lots of proteins that are all different colored, and then inside here you can see these chlorophyll molecules. They look a little bit like, what were those toys called that we used to build with? I can't remember. Not Legos, but they're the other kind of connecting toys. Anyway, they look like them. They're scattered throughout here. In the middle somewhere is our reaction center, where light energy is transferred to. Let's go over this again. What does it mean when I say that a pigment absorbs light? So one of these antenna pigment absorbs light, and then it's really absorbing photons or energy. So a pigment is really absorbing energy in the form of photons, kind of these packets of energy, right? And pigments then can transfer this energy to the reaction center. At least most pigments most of these antenna pigments are transferring light energy to the reaction center, chlorophyll A molecules. What happens to this energy after it's absorbed? Well, it's transferred, so we can write that in, that it's transferred to the reaction center. Oh boy, I hope you can read this. Transferred to the reaction center, where the reaction center chlorophyll A molecules get excited, and their electrons are temporarily excited. That's called photoexcitation, right? Photoexcitation is when electrons are moved to a higher energy orbital or a higher energy level because of the light energy that's been absorbed. Right? What happens to those electrons, those high energy electrons? Well, when you put pigment molecules outside of a working chloroplast, so if you take, say, spinach and crunch it all up and put it in some alcohol and put it outside, it'll start showing this really weird bright red color. It's called fluorescence. What's going on? What's essentially happening here is you've still got some pigment molecules, and those pigment molecules in the crunched up leaves are getting excited by light energy, and that's causing electrons to be elevated, to be excited. That's photoexcitation. Now, if there's not a working chloroplast, if we've got, chloroplasts all scrunched up, then these electrons are going to quickly just fall back to where they were. Just fall back to return to their ground state, if you will, get unexcited again. And as they fall back, they actually release some of that energy. Some of it as light, lower energy light, red light, and some of it as heat. We're not really interested in this. We want to know what happens to those excited electrons in a working chloroplast, because we want to know what happens to them. How are the light reactions used to grab light energy and make chemical energy, right? Somehow it has to do with these high energy electrons. Okay, so this is a picture of, this purple blob is a picture of a photosystem. There's two different photosystems in plants, photosystem 1 and photosystem 2. They have slightly different design, and their pigments at the reaction center absorb some wavelengths of light better than others. So the peak wavelength of light absorbed by photosystem 2, by the way, is 680 nanometers. Okay, so we really want to know what's going to happen to these high energy electrons. Light energy is absorbed by pigment molecules that transfer that energy to the reaction center. These reaction center chlorophyll A molecules get excited, and their electrons are moved to a higher energy level. What happens next? Electrons that are excited are quickly transferred to a primary electron acceptor in the photosystem, a molecule that can accept these high energy electrons. It's not going to hold them for long. Because what happens with high energy electrons? Well, in cellular respiration during oxidative phosphorylation, we used high energy electrons as a source of energy as they pass through an electron transport chain, remember? As they pass through an electron transport chain, they were used to drive a proton gradient that was used to make ATP. Guess what? There's an electron transport chain in plants too, in the light reactions. From here, these excited electrons move through an electron transport chain. A chain of molecules. Via a series of redox reactions, they fall down a chain of molecules. And when electrons fall back to their original low energy state, energy is released. This is an exergonic reaction. Energy that's released is used to drive the synthesis of ATP. We're going to make some chemicals here. We're going to see that it's very similar to oxidative phosphorylation. It's just that the energy is coming from somewhere else. So the energy that's released as these electrons fall down an electron transport chain is used to make ATP, and the electrons are eventually donated to something called NADP plus to make NADPH. The electrons are donated to NADP plus. NADP plus is reduced to NADPH. And we make something called NADPH, which is a little shuttler of high energy electrons. It's going to be useful later. So now we just have to look at the details of the light reactions. Here are a few of the details that we're going to see. We're going to write in some things now, and then we'll get back to them when we draw out this process. Turns out the light reactions are kind of complicated, and there are two different kinds. The one that we focus on the most are the linear electron flow light reactions. I've got to get my dog out. Jasper, go outside. Go outside. Sorry about that. So we're going to take a look on the whiteboard at the details of the light reactions. What we're going to see is that in linear light reactions, we're going to make ATP and NADPH. We're going to need the photosystems 1 and 2, and we're going to use water, right? Let's draw that out in a whiteboard drawing. We'll see you soon.